All right, can everyone see the proposed agenda from today? Hopefully so. It's going to be a few of these items are fairly brief, but I just wanted to call out that it's a big it's a lot, it looks long, but I think a few of these are only a few minutes of update. Great, thanks, Adam. And the first one being that we are AQAvit, in case people aren't aware, is a project under the Adoptium banner, just like Temarin is a project under the Adoptium banner. And AQAvit at the moment has 7 repositories that kind of are part of the project. This one that we're looking at the issue in, AquaTests, is the center. It's kind of the central repository where we do a lot of activity in. It's where our test definition files are. It's where a lot of the issues are raised. Even if the changes do have to happen in other repositories, we often report things to this repository just to keep things simple. Having said all of that, we've been around since for a long time. AQAvit proper existed prior to even moving all of Adoptium into the Eclipse Foundation. And we're happy to have announced at the end of January of this year that we have reached the 1.0.0 release and graduated from kind of an incubator project into a full-fledged project in the Eclipse Foundation sphere. And what that really means, you can actually go and read a blog post, which I'll share in the minutes. What that actually means is we've filled out all of the paperwork required in order to be able to pass the additional checks that are done by the Eclipse, the EMO office for IP, intellectual property, legal, proper use of trademarks, all of those kind of metadata things that projects must comply with when they're part of Eclipse Foundation. Those checks have been done and we're good to go. This is not to say that we haven't been releasing AQAvit for a long time now. The AQAvit release that we're talking about here refers to that metadata, but as many of you know, when you look over here at AQAvit releases, we have a long chain of those, and the most recent one being made this past week, and you can see that there are release notes that get generated for each one, and you can also see that when we do a AQAvit release, the intention is then we branch from that release and use it for upcoming JDK release periods. So the intention for this V101 release, which is the next one beyond the V100 release, will be to use it for March and April. What does that mean to everyone? That actually means if there are needed changes that we have been putting in the main line, the master branch, that we need to cherry pick into this release, we will do so, but we tend to limit the changes to the branch that is created to be only those that are necessary as part of the release. So there is the V10001 branch that is also created and now already slightly behind master, and that's to be expected. All righty, so and ask questions or type questions as you need. I do want to call out, and I'm so pleased to announce, you would see at the bottom of those release notes that for the past few GitHub releases that we've done, we've seen new contributions from first-time contributors to the AQAvit project, and those include a couple of Yuris that we've now met and are happy to be collaborating with. Yuri Anderlich, who brought in the test headless components, and Yuri Vanek, who brought in a churn GC test case. So some of the new test targets that have come in the last couple of weeks are from new contributors. So very pleased to welcome new contributors. I also note a lot of changes coming in from a new Sophia as well. So I will put a little note into the Slack channel after this call, tagging everyone and thanking them for being new contributors into this project. It's very exciting to see. Sophia, I wanted to ask if you'd just say a few words about this other new test that I know you're working on, just to say where it's coming in and maybe what it does as an overall, why we're adding it. If I can put you on the spot.
You mean reproducible tests?
Yeah.
Yeah. So reproducible tests, it's actually enabled in Tamarind build. So we want to incorporate that to our Aqua tests as a dev system category. So which means we can from Adoptium, it can be triggered from upstream pipeline as part of our Aqua tests. But initially, we trigger the test for Linux only and for 21 plus. Recently, it's possible to enable for the Windows and can run without the Docker. So actually that tests are in progress. So yeah, so that's the main thing I want to mention.
Yeah, and that's so great. So the implication here is that we're adding it. It lives in the Tamarind build repo, the actual scripts, and we're adding it as part of dev system, which means it's not required by anyone listing in the marketplace to be able to pass that test in order to list in the marketplace, because it's in a dev level. But it is there for other vendors to use if they want it. So that's a note about that. And I guess I'll share back my screen so everyone can see so I shouldn't have unshared. I'm probably going to lean on Lan or Longyu now to talk about some of these other features that have come in, and kind of the implication of when we say, what do we mean when we say FIPS support and CRIU support have been added to the AQAvit project? And I can stop sharing, Lan or Longyu, if you want to do any pointing at.
Sure, I can share my screen. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. So for the FIP support, it's mainly because we're for the similar SDK, we actually have support for FIPS 140-2 and 140-3. So in terms of the pipeline change, basically we have test flag that be able to set by the test pipeline, and then according to a different test flag, FIPS test flag, then you'll be able to do set different JVM options running on different machines, say FIPS enabled machines, and then also running the test based on FIPS feature exclude list from the for OpenJDK test, for example. So this basically is a way allowed us to run a different testing different features with a different JVM options, and then with a different way of exclude test. For the CRIU support, I have a diagram showing this. Maybe that's will help people to understand. Basically, for the CRIU support, what we really want to do is basically testing portable Docker-based testing. And then in order for us to actually properly test it, what we did is we actually added into the dev.external
it actually be able to create a child job automatically for the image upload, meaning that it will create a test image or Docker image in this particular case based on test that we specify, just like any test that we run in a sanity.functional or extended.functional. And then once we done the test, we will push the Docker image into a Docker registry. And then in this dev.external, it also triggers a child job, which is image pull, that basically pulls the Docker image down into can be the same machine, can be a different machine, depends on the map that user set up in the dev.external. So the parents basically controls what combination that we run on. And then in this, the image pull job, basically we just put it down on the expected machine and then do the restore. So it's more, it's really basically testing as a combination of really testing a Docker image from one machine to another to see whether that still works. So this is from nutshell what this CRU support is about. And then what, in addition to that, we also added the tab verification tools. So this is really, I have a PR to show. So whenever we have to collect tab file for AQAvit verification, which is needed for us to publish the binaries at the Debian marketplace. One thing that we find is a little bit difficult to do is that every time we collect a lot of tab file, especially when we run in parallel, we have lots of tab file, and then somebody has to eyeball it and try to figure out, do I have any tab file that's missing? So this basically is a feature enhancement that it's allowed the user to run this and quickly spot if there's anything missing. So in this particular case, I'm making it bigger, that would be able to say, okay, just run this and then check whether we have all the tab files. So it basically lists all the required AQAvit tab file and then show, hey, how many we have, and then listed them in the sorted order. And then also, I have some failed case here. Oops, guess cannot find anymore. But make it bigger here from here. So the failed case here basically is if there's a failed test in a tab file, it also be able to error it out and let people know, hey, you have the tab file, but there are some failures in a test, in the tab file. Then people needs to go through and figure out why that is. And then the third use case here, basically, if the tab file is like when we run a large number of parallelization, then in this particular case, we're missing. So we have _0, _1, _9. Clearly, there's missing from 2 to 8. So this is basically telling people, hey, if we run the check, then it will tell people, hey, you're missing the test list that expected. So this is just a starting. We will gradually adding more and more checks to help people to validate the tab file. And also we want to incorporate this as a part of the build pipeline as we run through all the tests and collect the Aqua test tab file. We want to actually automatically run those checks and be able to tell at that basically almost at the, once we're done testing, we'll be able to have a summary of what's going on. And then if the tab file are already satisfied, then we can already zip it and archive it in the top level build so that we can quickly grab it for the adopted marketplace. The last one on my list is pre-stage third-party test labs. So this is basically all started by one of the issue here. The reason being that in the original design, we do have a Jenkins API. We use Jenkins API copy artifacts to copy the third-party library. We have a, sorry, back out a little bit. We have a Jenkins job that stages all the third-party libraries that we need. So let's say JUnit or JTReg, all those third-party library, we stage it on the Jenkins job. And then when the test runs, then we use Jenkins API, copy artifacts to copy it over to the test job. Ideally, this should be fast. However, because of the globalization of the machines, and then due to the network issues and speed, bandwidth, all that, this may not be as ideal as we like it to be. So doing our from our observation is actually between like a minute to 30 minutes just to copy all the jars that we need for running a test. This is not ideal, and especially when people just need to run one test and then they has to wait, like say one test of like 1 minute, and they have to wait for the 30 minutes for the whole thing to download. So the idea here basically to what we did is we say, okay, then we don't need to download everything. How about we pre-stage it on the Jenkins machine? So if the jar doesn't exist, the third-party jars that does not exist on Jenkins machine, then we should download it. There's no choice, of course. But if we do have the jars on the machine, and then we can just check the shard and make sure it's up to date, and then we just keep going, right? If it's not up to date, of course, obviously we have to re-download it. But if it's like same shard as we expected, then we don't need to do much. So in this PR, I put some numbers here. Basically, how we do this, we are downloading the jars into the home Jenkins and test dependency. So there's a folder that's created outside of the workspace, and all jars are staged there. And then in my test, if we have to stage all jars and say we don't have anything on the machine, it takes 30 seconds to do so. And if we do have the jars on the machine, only need to check whether shards match, that takes less than a second. So this basically improves the whole efficiency of the test pipeline. I think that's it from me. Any questions?
Well, I don't have questions. I just have a wow, great comment. And also, I know for the tap verification tools, we have a few other pieces of verification that we're going to incorporate into what you've already developed there, Lan, just for awareness for folks on the call. A couple of additional verification pieces will be verifying the SHAs. So if, as probably most people know, we grab and track the SHAs of the test material being used and write it into the top of the TAP files. So we want to help vendors who are using these make sure that they're matching up to the correct appropriate SHAs for the different test repos that are being pulled in and used. So there will be additional kind of augmentation to these tools, essentially meant to help vendors quickly check that they've done the right thing and that they don't have to rerun things. Yeah, great. I will ask if there are any other questions, please ask them. And again, I don't see any in the chat. So and the next one really isn't going to be a demo, but I wanted a few words from you, Sophia, just to note that this is a wonderful feature that's coming in or has landed now for people that are using the AQAvit, AQUAtests Jenkins scripts to be running their TCK material. And I guess the way we would talk about this would be for people who are using our scripts to run TCK material. You're already probably aware that we have what are called custom test targets that are defined in playlists. Specifically, some of you would have used the JDK custom targets or the hotspot custom targets that you would see in the OpenJDK directory in the playlist files. Equivalently, there are now a JCK custom targets. Sophia, do you want to say just a few words about that? I know we can point at the playlist as well so people can understand what it looks like.
Yeah, sure. It's quite similar to the JDK custom. For the GCK one, we divide the GCK custom to GCK compiler custom, GCK dev tool custom, and GCK runtime custom. For using it, it's also similar to the JDK custom. You specify the GCK compiler custom, and then using specify the target is your test case. And right now, it also supports the multiple test case, which means you can set multiple test case separated by space or separated by semicolon. And the difference, I think there's some update different from before is for compiler, runtime, and dev tools, you do not need to add that test suite. So only the test case is enough.
Yeah, that's great. I think,
yeah.
well, that's all we need to say about it, but I do want to also add, you've included the same feature we have for JDK custom targets, where at the end of a test run, you add a link at the top of the Jenkins job that says rerun the failed targets or the failed test cases. So
Yeah.
instead of having to rerun the entire target, say we were talking about JDK custom, if JDK math failed with one big decimal.java test case failing, you have the option to rerun the individual test case in a grinder. Now we have that same feature for the TCK test cases. So it's just going to be wonderful and help shorten the turnaround time for reruns. So that'll be great.
Yeah,
Thank you
it will
much.
depend on the failing. If it's a compiler failing, you will have that rerun GCK compiler customer link. Or
Yeah.
if it's the dev one, it will have that dev links. So depends on the failings.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, good. We won't dwell on it anymore, but for people who have questions, you can message myself or Sophia directly if you need to. I know the Tamarind compliance crew will be interested in this. All right, the last kind of new feature we were going to call out here on the list was the auto update of the testdev properties files to populate the values for the JDK branches. And this one relates to the fact that in the past, what we had been doing was having to change this file at the last minute when the GA tag was made available, which then slows down our ability to automatically trigger testing, and it causes extra work for a release champion. So now with that PR that's linked there, 5102, we've made a change that says, and actually, Lan, if you don't mind to click on that one link, we made a change that says if you have a, we will automatically populate the testdev properties with the -GA tag that we expect that will be used for the upcoming release period. And can you click on Grinder 8979, the one below? Yeah, thanks. So in this case, in my test here, I have a testdev properties that has a GA, is using a GA tag that isn't yet published for the upstream branch. And because it isn't published for the upstream branch, we invoke some code that says, hang on, that tag doesn't exist. Go fetch me the most recent tag that shares the same prefix. So it will go fetch the latest tag that's closest to the same prefix that is listed. So because this JDK 11.0.23-GA tag doesn't exist, it's going off and finding the +4, and then it's writing that to the test.env properties file, which then gets archived to the Jenkins job so that we know what was used. So this should help us during release period. The one caveat I'm going to say, I have to check our build pipelines, but I know we have a check in the build pipelines that say, make sure that the tag you've built with is also the tag you're using to run the tests, where you're pulling the test material from. I haven't checked how that check works. I know, Sophia, you added it, but we may need to verify that that's still going to work. And if not, we'll have to then, what I think we might want to do is just compare SHAs in that pipeline code. But anyway, we'll know next week when we do a dry run, or we can try to find out about it a little ahead of the dry run. So that's all I wanted to say about this feature, and I'm hoping it makes life for Release Champion a little bit easier. Okay, we can go back to that agenda, I think. And let's pause. I don't know if people had questions for what they've heard so far on some of the new feature stuff. But if you do, please say so, or add even comments into this issue 5090. That's great. And I do, next topic, did want to thank that we have a bunch of new contributors. I know I did that at the top of the call, and I will actually do a little Slack call out after this call ends. But you can also see when you look at the release notes that any new contributors that have PRs in a given release get called out at the bottom of the release notes in a big thank you. And also to say we've got also great questions. I know we've onboarded the Fujitsu team to be using some of these tools, and we'll be using their absolutely wonderful questions that they've been asking us in the Slack channel to help flesh out some additional documentation. And also want to call out thanks. I know we mentioned Yuri and Yuri, but there are other folks from the Red Hat QE teams, Denek and Alice and others, who are kind of starting to play with some of our tools and have been doing contributions and learning about how we do things. And I expect we'll do a lot more collaboration. I'm looking forward to that. Okay, quickly going into stretch goals for 2024. I don't think we have published the base goals, but I know we do have a plan in place for the things we're going to be achieving or trying to achieve in 2024. I'll add that at the end of the call into the minutes so people are aware. But generally, we've done this every year since AQAvit has existed. We look at the year, we try to determine what we absolutely need to do, which is support new development. And this also relates to our AQAvit manifesto. We absolutely need to keep pace and keep evolving alongside the JDKs that we are testing. So it is a mission of ours, as you see with some of those new features, to keep up with some of the new things that are coming, FIPS and the checkpoint and restore CRIU features, this kind of stuff. So there's always going to be that kind of innovation work, but also making sure that we test the new features coming in. On top of that, we also have a list, I call a wish list, but could also be called stretch goals for 2024. And I've kind of listed a couple here And the one I kind of want to spend a minute or two on is talking about the Trestle initiative. And why I wanted to mention it is because this is the week where I'm going to try to lift up the Trestle pipeline, which is a build pipeline that will trigger builds and run tests at Adoptium. And what's special about this pipeline is that it's going to trigger testing against the upstream project, OpenJDK project, and help support developers working in that project, specifically developers who work for Adoptium working group members. So if you take a look at the list of working group members, there's many companies that are involved, and we're going to onboard some of their developers to trialing this feature where we bridge between the OpenJDK project and Adoptium. And that's why the name Trestle, if in case you're wondering, Trestle is a horizontal piece that helps form a bridge. So it's part of a bridge because we want a nice, strong relationship with the OpenJDK project. And that was what I was going to say about it. Again, in the minutes, I'll link to the CI Jenkins pipeline issue that's raised for the Trestle piece, and also to a short PDF presentation that was presented to the working group, who are on board and supportive of this initiative, even though it means sharing some of our resources at the project. They think it would be a valuable thing for their and a very valued perk of membership into the working group. Did anyone have questions there before I open her up for some AOB? And I am gonna put G on the spot for the next one. So, yeah, we don't have questions. G, may I call you up to talk about the issue you just raised and some of the stuff you've been looking at from the perspective of test metrics?
Yeah, sure.
Great.
I don't know if you wanted me to share
Yeah,
screen.
if you want to share the screen, we can have Lan drop and you pick up.
Okay.
Yeah. And some of you might already seen the issue, but this will be an open call to add additional comments into the issue. Not to say that G's on the hook to try to, address all of them, but it's a way for us to gather. 5121, right at the top of the list. Yeah, great, G. So do you want to say a few words and also maybe mention that this was even part of that recap talk that you did in the last community call or recent?
Yeah, sorry, I was actually saying stuff, but I realized I had muted myself somehow.
Okay.
So, sorry, yeah. So this is issue 5121 that was opened recently, and essentially looking to see what kind of metrics we can provide per release specific to the tests that are being run at the project. So the issue mentions that we do have some useful release metrics via scorecards by Shelley that track how well we are doing to meet release targets for our tar balls and how that's trending across releases. And we have plans to augment that, I think, with installers and containers as well. But similarly, I think it would be nice to have data to help us track the health, quote unquote, as it's a bit of a vague term there, on our test suite execution across releases as well. So how well the tests are doing in terms of their pass and fail rate, and understanding that as it trends between CPU releases, so that we can better understand what is hurting us most in a sense, and trying to highlight those opportunities for future fixes. So there's a short proposal in terms of what metrics might be useful to track as a starter for discussion, and a note on how this is likely to involve enhancing the existing release summary report, which I've abbreviated as RSR, so I don't have to type it out as often in future content, just FYI. And so Shelley also has some comments as well already in terms of additional metrics that could be worth tracking, which I think are quite good, actually. I liked all of them. So I guess this is kind of a call out that this issue exists, and I am looking to any feedback people have on what could be presented, how it could be presented, and we're generally just trying to find value in these metrics. So how we can then take that data that we'll be collecting and presenting to help us improve the tests and the test execution process so that at least on the Tamarind side, the burden on our triage engineers is reduced over time, ideally.
Yeah,
Um,
thanks for raising this issue, G.
mhm.
And I know I was talking to Lan, was it yesterday already, Lan? About even the, we can revisit the manifesto, because I think it also listed a few metrics we would be interested in. And Lan reminded me about the one where we wanted to measure when was the last time a particular test found a bug. An actual real bug, because if we have test suites or tests that are not finding things regularly, we can also think to reorganize what gets run often and what gets run less often. And also, I think the notion of when and if we reorganize tests, you know, what impact does that have to all of the vendors, and how will we communicate that? The other piece of this would be, as we're deciding what metrics we want to measure, I think clearly stating what the metric is for is important, because, and that's why you'll see in a couple of things that I've mentioned what it would tell us and what next action it would drive. Because I think we want to prioritize metrics that drive actions that matter, as opposed to just gathering stuff or whatever, just because we can. So that way it might help prioritize which ones are more important and should be done first. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to add, I also raised an issue back last year about 4378. And then also I listed several ideas there as well.
Okay, yeah, we should relate that to this issue and pull them over. Yeah. Yeah, great.
Sorry, what was the number?
I'm gonna send the link in the chat. It's
Okay.
4278.
Great. Yeah, wonderful. So yeah, the action to everyone on the call is to think about, read through this issue and think about other things that you might think are interesting, and say why you think they're interesting and what it could inform, how it could improve our work by gathering it. Yeah, great. Fantastic. While G is adding that, I guess the other thing we had in it, well, before we get to open call for AOB, I guess I do want to mention that I had interest from folks that are going to help with adding some new docs, and that since I've been teasing about that triage recording that I have prepared but haven't published, I'm hoping that will happen this week as well. And I'll also upload the PDF for the triage training into our AQUAtest repo. So that should help people. And it again was informed by lots of great questions, both from the Fujitsu team and the Red Hat QE team, as they've been kind of looking and playing with some of our stuff. So thanks again for the great questions. The last kind of written down AOB that I had there was that salsa level. And noting, and we have some folks on the call that probably have thoughts and opinions on this as well, but noting that the Eclipse Foundation has the initiative to have salsa rankings for all projects under the Eclipse Foundation banner. So that includes AQAvit. So we'll have to determine what that means for projects that don't actually distribute a binary, for source code only projects. We do think there's a lot of things in place that are helpful and that help us, you know, download things safely, help us check and validate artifacts that are being used, help us reproduce a test run to the exact SHAs that are captured in the artifacts that we store after a run. But one of the stretch goals for 2024 will be to look a little bit more at what it means to even apply a salsa badge or level to a project like AQAvit and go from there. So I think that would happen later in the year. I don't think it's a high priority, but because it is one of the secure development initiatives that Eclipse Foundation is trying to champion, we'll take a look at that toward the end of the year. So at that point, I'm gonna say, let's open it up to AOB from everyone else. If you have questions or things you want to talk about, please either say them or type them. We'll see if we can answer a few. And if not, I'm going to force you to look quickly at just a one-pager slide.
Shall I stop sharing then, shall we?
Sure, yeah. And if everyone's quiet because they can't unmute, that I think Carmen's on the call now, so maybe she can help. People were having a hard time. Some people were unable to unmute Carmen, but they can type, I guess.
No, I can unmute just fine. Just
Okay,
don't have
great.
anything to ask.
Okay,
Thank you.
great. I'll quickly share one other thing then before we call it, because I do want people to take a look, I guess. Are we able to see this slide? What is triage and why?
Yes.
Okay, great. This is part of the recording that I'll send out a little later this week. But what I wanted to say was, you know, it's pretty remarkable what happens by all teams, all vendors across the board, but including Adoptium as we produce Tamarin, what actually gets triggered during these releases and what gets distributed once those criteria of passing AQAvit and TCK occurs. So I wanted to kind of show a picture, but mostly I wanted to share the terminology that we use at the project, just for people's reference, to help see that when we're talking about levels and you're looking at a grid view in TRSS, you're looking at those rows. When we're talking about groups and how we group different test material, you're looking at the columns. And we have different groups that are often related in what they do or where the tests come from. So things like OpenJDK are what's often referred to as JT-Reg tests from the OpenJDK project. broken out into different groups. At the moment, the sanity.openjdk chiclet, that little green thing that's almost in the middle of the graph, reflects the tier 1 tests from OpenJDK. There is an open issue in our AQAtest repo for me to look at moving the tier 2 tests into that sanity level as well, because right now extended level contains tier 2, tier 3, and tier 4, and is quite large. So we may look at reorganizing some of those targets. What do we mean by targets? Top level target, if you see that terminology anywhere, that refers to the set of test targets that are tagged in a certain level and a certain group. So Sanity OpenJDK is a top level target. It's a group of test targets. What is a test target? These are the things that are defined inside of playlists, and you'll see the name, test case name, in those XML files, playlist.xml files, and each one of those test case names is referring to a test target, and they may contain tens or hundreds or thousands of test cases. So in the case of the example I have here, JDK Math, there's about 41 test cases inside of JDK Math, depending on what version of JDK you're talking about. And one of the test cases of those 41 would be the big integer test file. And inside of a test case, there could be many individual test methods that are called. So even though a test case refers in this case to the class, it doesn't mean there's only one thing that gets verified inside of that class. And then we have pipeline states, and we have test states. And I'll just let you wait for the recording to hear what I mean by all of those different things. But I did want to just quickly get to this view because I also think it will be of value to those who are using TRSS. Again, it'll come out in the recording, but there are what we call action buttons in TRSS. And this is kind of the cheat sheet for what those different action buttons mean and what they do. And the demo that I will have in the recording shows an example of each one of those. But I'll probably incorporate this diagram directly into our documentation as a quick cheat sheet and view of how to use TRSS. So that was all I was gonna cover today in that, but just as a preview of what some of the stuff is coming in terms of documentation and sharing. That one has taken a while to get produced, but I think it can get published this week. So thanks for your patience on that one. Okay, any other business? One last call, and if not, we'll possibly close early here. And again, a reminder, these calls, instead of being so frequently, we're going to plan to have them 4 to 6 weeks after a release period ends. And that seems like the right number of meetings to add. So we'll plan another one after March, which hopefully isn't right in the middle of an April release, but we may adjust accordingly. And I'll create a new issue to grab ideas for the next agenda. All right. I think I did a lot of talking there. Apologies. If there's no other questions, I want to thank everyone for joining and those who were sharing and talking about some of the great work that's happening at the project. I really think there's been a lot of cool stuff happening. So thanks everyone for your contributions. We'll call it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Bye, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye, Shelley.